Greetings, everyone. My name is Vince Solis. I'm the proud president of Brazosport College. Our podcasts for leadership continue as the topic for the 25-2026 academic year. Thank you for joining us on another great episode. Today, we continue our discussions on leadership and the subtopics of leadership that come with it. Today's topic, and we're going to be talking about, is going to be reputation and personal stories that lead to character and all the things involved with leadership and being effective at what you do in these positions. I'm really excited today because we have one of our own student graduates from way back in the day. We have our very own Texas Ranger, Aaron Arizmendi from Company A. Is that
Yes,
correct, Ranger?
yes.
Yeah. So Ranger Arizmendi has been with the Texas Ranger for several years. He's got 34 years of law enforcement experience. As I mentioned, he's a graduate of the BC Law Enforcement Academy. We're really excited. Ranger, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for
It's an
coming out.
honor.
I know that you're super busy, and I appreciate you taking time to come out.
Well, you're welcome. I was glad to do it.
Absolutely, we're so proud of you, Ranger, and being one of our own as a BC graduate. It's great to have you as part of the Gator Nation.
It's nice to come back and see not a lot has changed, but there's a lot that hasn't changed here. It's
Yeah,
nice to visit again.
our commitment to students remains the same, and I know that you had a good time while you were here as a
I did.
student. And you're speaking to students tomorrow.
I am.
Yeah.
The Police Academy day class, I'll speak to them in the morning.
So, Ranger, as we talk about leadership, what are some words of wisdoms you're going to share with our students tomorrow about the important role of being a law enforcement official? In this case, in your case, a member of a storied institution, over 200 years of service to the state of Texas. What does a Ranger tell the group of cadets that are sitting there wide-eyed with the Texas Ranger in front of them?
You know, you never know where your career is going to take you. Um, I'd always imagined being a Texas Ranger, but the reality of it wasn't really something that I anticipated in the beginning. You know, I started local law enforcement prior to even going to DPS, and it's a requirement to be in DPS just to get to the Rangers. So with that, your reputation means a lot, and you start building that reputation in law enforcement from the first day from the academy. These chiefs, these administrators talk to the instructors, and many times they are the instructors in the
Yeah.
local academy, and you're setting that example of what you represent and who you are and where you want to be in your life and career before you ever graduate.
Yeah. So, Ranger, you talked a little bit about reputation. That's a big part of today's discussion because it leads into that whole character component. And uh, we've talked before about well, for starters, the relatively small number of Texas Rangers that there are in the state of Texas. I think there's just a little over 180, if I'm not mistaken. Is that a correct number?
It's a little over 180, but that includes our administration,
Okay.
investigative rangers. We're around 155
Okay.
actual rangers out in the field.
So for the great state of Texas, you got 150 plus rangers that do all manner of investigative work. As I mentioned, storied history within the state, legendary, right? So you mentioned something to me once that has stuck with me, and we were talking about the reputation of a law enforcement agency like the Texas Rangers, that there are films and movies and books and stories, and the list goes on and on, TV shows about the Rangers, and we talked about reputation. And you said something to me that really hit home. It said that I guess one of your mentors or someone that you knew in an authority position said when you became a ranger that there wasn't anything you were going to be able to do to enhance that reputation as a ranger because of you're standing on the shoulder of all these giants, but you could destroy a part of that reputation based on misjudgments or character flaws or anything that you went in there. I thought that was really, significant. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like? If you can tell us that story.
Yeah, well, so when you come into the Rangers and go through your promotion, you go back and meet with your major, which is the highest level of supervision within each company.
Yeah.
And so it's you usually get that talk on, the road, the rules of the road and the company and the expectations within that company and the Rangers. And Major Huff, he was my first major, great major, great person. He was a great example of what a Texas Ranger is. And he d that was some of his words of wisdom is, "Hey, very easily and quickly, you can destroy the reputation that has been built before you ever came in."
Yeah.
And, not only that, but your best efforts is what it's gonna take to maintain that reputation. It takes very little to destroy it, but it's going to take everything you have just to keep it where it's at,
Yeah.
and it's proven to be true, just interaction with the public, their expectations of
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. So, how do you overcome, Ranger, as a leader in the community, the legendary kind of status for the Rangers in the communities? And I'm sure you get this a lot from the schools that you visit, the students that you're going to talk to tomorrow. There's obviously that storied status that comes with being a Texas Ranger. How do you, two parts to this? How do you balance that as a leader, knowing that you've got that responsibility? And then the second part is there a time when you're not a Ranger? Like, do you ever separate that out, or are you just on 24/7?
You're on 24/7, and not just with the work and the job, which I'll get to, but, um, you represent yourself, your character, your integrity, who you are in your personal life and as a ranger, they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
As a father, as a parent, as a community leader. Um, it doesn't mean that only rangers can represent themselves at that level. Everyone
Yeah.
should. And so it's the little things that build up to that reputation. Um, Keeping your word, doing what you say. Another great thing I was told years ago by another ranger was never promise more than you can do, but always do more than you promised. And
So, Ranger, when you're dealing with there's this whole concept idea behind the status of the Rangers, the one Ranger, one riot kind of
sure,
reputation. So how do you balance that out? People are expecting beyond the Ranger and the hat and obviously the uniform,
sure.
but the big red boots, the cape,
Mhm.
making it happen. Superman, Superwoman showing up to solve the problems. How do you navigate those pieces?
It's difficult, not only on us, but on our families
Yeah,
because of those expectations. You really don't have a choice. You have to fulfill them.
yeah,
I mean, it's what Texas expects of us, and so you have to um, both on and off duty. You perform and act the same. I mean, the whole thing in law enforcement years ago I learned was as an officer, you live in a glass house. Everyone can see, and you're always on. I think as a ranger, that's probably more accurate. Living in a glass house for local officers, it's maybe a little more of you have a glass room you're in within your house. There's places and times where you're not exposed that you can relax or
yeah,
be away. As a ranger, you're always in public view.
yeah.
Um, we're not as known as much, but when people do encounter us or see us, there's a level of expectation that's um, it doesn't matter whether we're at work or not.
So are you ever like at a local eatery or a restaurant and there's a child in the place that says, "Holy cow, there's a Texas Ranger right there." You ever deal with that?
From time to time,
Yeah.
remarkably, there's a lot of people that aren't familiar with the Texas Rangers. I guess as years go on, we've lost a little bit of attention
Yeah.
in the media, in TV and film. But it's opportunities like this that remind people that we exist. We're out there. We're in your community. We're a part of the community.
Ranger, so at what point in your career, because we talked a little bit about this prior to the show starting, how important your family is to you in your career track and how you navigated that. Because sometimes some of these responsibilities require moves, require taking different
Mhm.
positions. You got to kind of do the whole navigating the career ladder.
Sure.
You talked about how important that family piece was, and sounds like you could have gotten to the Rangers sooner, but you made some very conscious choices to make sure that the things that mattered the most, which were
Mhm.
family, were at the foremost of your decision making? Is that
Sure.
kind of how did you get to the goal of saying, "Hey, I'm going to be a ranger," but then balancing that as a leader?
I started after 4 years in highway patrol. I became eligible to promote within DPS. I promoted to the narcotics service and was stationed in Laredo. My family remained at home while I went. Um, on the weekends when we could, either I would come home or they would come down to see me. And it was based on the job requirements and what I did for safety. We just weren't comfortable with them being there. And then moving around after that, it puts a toll on your family
Sure.
life, on your kids. And they didn't ask to be a part of this. This was my choice. And so I felt strong that I did not want to put them through that again. And in the Rangers, it's quite difficult to promote where you live, where home is. You usually have to move off, and at some point in time, you work your way and through transfers back home.
Yeah.
And so I passed up on not really passed up on opportunities. I did not take opportunities to test or try when openings came. Um, I was encouraged by many of the Rangers who I came up through DPS with at many times to go out for the Rangers, but I didn't want my family to go through that pressure of us being separated again, or even just having to move. So I gave up on it.
So once you set your mind to becoming a ranger, you'd already been in law enforcement many, many years. What was the process like for you?
So the first part in DPS, well, I mean, it starts from the beginning, right? Rangers, you have to have a character, a personality, exhibit integrity. You can't get that when you become a ranger. You have to be that person before you ever decide to apply. Um, so it begins with a written exam, quite extensive written exam. Uh, if they're going to take, say, 15 people to an interview board, out of however many tests, the top 15 get to go to the interview board. Then you complete a promotional packet that includes examples of 7 different competencies. And you have to show in your life or career how you um, how you showed a mastery of those competencies, and that's compared to other applicants. So you basically have to be the all-star of the group. You have to
Yeah.
have done things already in your career. You can't do it after the fact. And so it just goes to show that it all begins when you start your career in law enforcement. If you wait, it's quite often too late to get there.
So Ranger, let me ask this. So I often ask this question of guests, especially when we're talking about leadership. So if you could take what you know now, all
Mhm.
your experiences and the things that you've gone through, and could give advice to like what you're going to do tomorrow when you meet with our students, what's one thing that you would tell your younger self about the path that you've been on? What advice would you send back to a younger Ranger Arizmendi who was just starting out his career in law enforcement?
Do your job and live your life like everyone's watching you all the time. Make the decisions like everyone is the most significant decision of your life. It's going to build up to something one day. Question is, what is that something going to be? Um, the bare minimum is not enough. You have to always work and exceed those minimum expectations. If you're not getting a perfect on your evaluation, you should look at it as a failure and work harder to get that next time.
How often do you encounter that as a character component in someone? There are individuals, obviously like yourself, that will take that to heart. But as we navigate dealing with employees in different entities, whether it's at the College of Business or in law enforcement, finding those individuals, I guess that's why
Mhm.
they rise through the ranks, and the whole concept of the cream rises to the top. Because it's not everybody that's going to take those pieces to heart and say, you know what, I take full responsibility. This is on me. I'm going to do better next time and get a higher score on that evaluation. Most of the times, you're going to hear something like, "Well, I can't believe that Ranger Arizmendi or Dr. Solis they tagged me on this on my evaluation."
Mhm.
Most of the time, I'd say 8 out of 10 times, you're going to hear the "This isn't my fault"
Mhm.
versus the 10 to 20% that says, "Hey, you know what? Thank you for the feedback. That's on me." I got it from here, and I'm gonna do better next time. That part of understanding, and taking that responsibility, I think, is in the smaller category than the bigger group that says that, "That's my supervisor's fault. That's not on me."
Well, it starts with the leadership.
Yeah,
Leaders are mentors.
yeah,
They lead by example. They show compassion. They're teachers. They want to develop those beneath them. And if all is being done right, it's easy to praise someone when they
yeah,
do right. It's hard to confront them when they're not doing the right thing or doing good enough. But you're doing them a disservice when you
that's
don't.
right.
There's a way to you can't avoid confrontation. You can't do it as a ranger,
Those
definitely.
difficult conversations, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And if you truly are trying to develop people in this profession, you have to have those difficult conversations. And you have to understand life, right? We all have wives and children and deaths in the family and difficulties that we're going through on the personal side, and it does bleed over into the professional side sometimes. And that's where I think good leaders recognize that
Yeah.
change in those issues and create an environment that they may feel comfortable to approach you to have that discussion, and you may be able to save that person's career if you just have those tough conversations.
The difficult, yeah, because that's where you grow, right?
Yes.
When you know. Ranger, what about, so you've got this responsibility of not just being a law enforcement official, but you're a Texas Ranger. Um, what comes with the responsibility of that badge that most people are not aware of, beyond the sacrifice and the hard work and the dedication? And as we go back to the numbers, there's 150 of you throughout the state. What do people not see about what it takes to get to this position in terms of leadership?
Yeah. You know, you have to you're always chasing that snake, turning over rocks looking for the snake, putting yourself in that position of danger or difficulty or potential failure more than the others. And you have to be passionate about it. This career, you have to have a passion. It's not a job, it's a career.
Yeah,
Um, Family sacrifice is huge
it is.
in
Yeah.
law enforcement, but even as a ranger, all your investigations are newsworthy as opposed to one or two that come along. With that brings a lot of attention. A
Is that
lot of,
because of the nature of what you're dealing with, Ranger?
yes, sir. We typically investigate the most heinous crimes, violent crimes, political and integrity investigations
So the spotlight's on times 100.
all the time. Um, we have public information requests that come in weekly for our investigations that are scrutinized on social media and everywhere else. There's quite often civil suits behind the incident that we conducted that investigation on, where more attention comes. So the expectations are at such a level; it's hard to ever just not be perfect.
Right.
Um, the nature of a lot of the crimes, whereas an officer may investigate a murder once in his career, some investigators, depending on the agency, more often, and for those it's the same. And when you do those investigations in your community, people don't realize that you go to the local restaurant, and every time because of working possibly a murder there, you see those faces every
Yeah.
time you walk in there with your family. Um, it just never is turned off, never goes away. Uh,
So, Ranger, as a human being, how do you deal with that? How do you process that? How do you navigate that internally? How do you deal with those? What do you do as a person to deal with those stressors?
sure. I think for everybody, it's a little bit different. Um, I know previously in the early years of law enforcement, it was just kind of toughen up, take it. It's
Right.
just part of the job, deal with it. I think we've evolved and recognized now the mental health aspect of doing the job. So we encourage officers or investigators that experience those cases or trauma. Sometimes it's one incident, sometimes it's just the continuous over years to go speak to a mental health specialist. We have them within our agencies all around. just to, with some coping mechanisms, help to work through those. I think family is huge. Family and faith are the two number one things.
Yeah.
It helps keep it all in perspective. Um, it, to some degree, I turn it off when I go home. I don't discuss my job
Yeah.
and cases with family. For one, it traumatizes them too. Um, but I try to keep it separate and have activities, sports, hobbies, things that help. And I encourage all officers, don't, it's a lifestyle, but don't let it dictate who you are.
Right. Yeah. Embody the ethos of what it is to be a ranger, but you also have to be able to disconnect when appropriate
Yes.
so that you can continue to be excellent in the role that you have, the responsibility that you
Yes.
have as a ranger. Ranger, let me ask this. So there's obviously a lot of things that embody being a Texas Ranger in terms of rules, regulations, policies, laws, legislation. It goes on and on and on. What are the unwritten things about leadership that you would share with our audience? What are those unwritten codes that the Rangers exist that exist within the Rangers that are not written down anywhere?
There's things we operate by that apply elsewhere. One of them is I mentioned earlier, don't promise more than you do and always do more than you can promise. But if someone calls you, and then this is, we all practice it, for a resource, for help, for a search warrant example, simple things, I'm not going to make them or have them make another phone call for that answer. They trusted and believed in me enough to call me for help. If there's more phone calls or resources to find that they need, I will do it. And it takes a lot of time and effort, but when they depend on you, you need to consistently be there for them. Answer the questions. And people look to rangers to always have the answer. They'll find it if you don't have it.
Yeah. And make sure you're making those connections with the community while you're doing it. So it's
Yes.
not just about doing the investigation, you're also dealing with the PR piece, you're dealing with the spotlight's always on component. Yeah. So Ranger, so when you show up to these very intense scenes, right? And as I understand it, there is the agency that will call out for the need of a ranger, right? Is that kind of the process? So
Correct.
an agency may say, hey, you know what, this is either specialized or we don't have the resources, or it requires a different set of eyes or an impartial judge, not judge, but in this case, an impartial investigator
Sure.
to kind of examine this. You get the call. Um, how much of your reputation as a ranger dictates how that plays out, knowing that these are different entities that are calling on you to come in and help with a given situation? In this case, these are very serious incidents that they're dealing with. How much of that reputation helps in that process?
So if it's an agency I'm not familiar with or officers, um, that reputation of the Rangers gets me buy-in from the beginning. They trust, they depend on me, they believe in me. But I have to show through example and work effort that I deserve that reputation, that I deserve them to trust and believe in me. And it starts with basic things. When we go to a scene, as long as there's leads for that investigation, just for example, a murder, we're going to stay there and we're going to work through it until we've exhausted all those leads, no matter what the hours are. Agencies may send home investigators and have shifts where others come in. We don't leave. We stay there. We're persistent. We don't leave. We're the
So you
last
don't
to
ever
go.
leave the scene until at what point do you make the so that could go on for a day and you're still the one ranger that's taking the case and dealing with it.
It could go on for days. Um, Usually, the investigation dictates it. If we're chasing down leads, the severity of it. Are we looking for a missing child? Are we, and we have good leads to chase down, or we're looking for a murder suspect and we have good information to try to locate them. Once we've exhausted all of those and there's a lull in information or action, um, that's when we'll determine to get some rest, whatever little bit we can,
Yeah.
and then we'll come back at it again. We're
But
the
it,
last to leave and the first to show back up.
but as I understand the region, when we discussed it, once you are the person that gets either the call or the assignment or the requested, that is then at that point yours until it gets completed? Is that how it works?
It varies at times, yes. It's determined a lot by the agency. Some
Yeah.
agencies are very experienced. They may just need a few of our expertise or resources that we have. They don't need help with the entire investigation. Whereas other agencies lack the experience or knowledge to conduct a murder investigation. So we're in the lead in directing that entire case from the beginning. These agencies aren't required to follow us, and that's where that leadership plays a big role. Um,
So they're not required to follow.
no, other than a few
Right.
circumstances and cases,
So then
um,
it all goes back to that reputation. That
absolutely,
they're gonna do it because, "Hey, we know that we've got." I see what you're saying. That's an important
absolutely.
part of it. Ranger, when you're dealing with these difficult cases, and you use the word heinous, which I can only imagine the things that you're dealing with or have dealt with, how do you manage internally when something is so opposed to your own values, to your own beliefs, to the things that make you, this upstanding citizen, and then you're dealing with, a very different part of the world and life circumstances? How do you navigate it when what you're dealing with is so in opposition to your day to day values as a human
Mhm.
being?
You know, you always go back to that oath that you took, and the oath to uphold the Constitution of Texas and the U.S. and the laws, and those that uh, wrote those rules had the right thing in mind. They're backed by what's best for the whole, not just for an individual. And so even though I may not agree with it personally, I know that it's for the betterment of society and I stick to that oath. And as long as you adhere and stick with it, you have something enormous to base that decision on to back you in those choices you make. Um, Fortunately, most of my morals and ethics fall in line with
Yeah.
what our laws, what our Constitution is. Um, I know that's a concern nowadays. You see a lot of social media, a lot of controversy surrounding those things. But for us, it's
But how do you keep in check, Ranger, when you show up and a child has
mm,
been, assaulted or hurt,
mhm,
or an elderly person, someone that can't fend themselves? How do you separate that humanity from not getting upset or not getting emotional about dealing with something that can be, so far out of the norm for day to day folks like myself to even imagine? Because I can't even imagine what that would be like ever dealing with it. You deal with it on
mhm.
a regular basis. How do you keep yourself from not getting upset and not, getting emotional about a difficult situation like that when someone has been hurt or harmed, or in this case, or in many cases, murdered, or
Sure,
there's a lot of difficult things that happen in your profession. How do
sure.
you how do you stay focused on the good things that people bring to the space?
I, it starts from the beginning. Those little exposures and tasks to progressively those things that are more significant in law enforcement. It builds upon that to where when you're put in the situation of investigating a child murder, you learn to separate the human from the investigation. You focus on the tasks at hand, what the objective is. It's truly experience based and exposure. It's not easy, and it's those downtimes, those slow times, those drives home between days that it starts to hit you.
So what does the internal dialogue look like? What does it sound like to you as you're driving back from North Houston? You got an hour and a half
Mhm.
drive to get back home, and you just dealt with a real difficult situation. What does the internal dialogue sound like?
I constantly have to put myself back in check and revisit the tasks at hand. What
Yeah.
needs to be done? What when I start my day tomorrow, or what can I do on the drive home? It's very task oriented. Otherwise, you will just go down a path of emotional,
Yeah.
you know, distress the whole time. Um, After the case is closed and concludes, you still have to get a conviction on it. You still have to go through the prosecution. Um,
How many of these do you juggle at once, Ranger? What's the caseload look
oh my
like?
goodness, I probably have right now somewhere around 35 or so active cases. And active comes in different ways. It may just be at a point that I'm trying to get the case packaged and prepared to submit, or it could be actively writing search warrants or conducting interviews.
Yeah, the whole one ranger, one riot doesn't sound the same as one ranger, 40 cases. It just yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Ranger, let me ask this: what are some of the components to integrity that you feel are critical to being a ranger or a high functioning law enforcement official? Is integrity something you think the cadets that you're going to speak with tomorrow already have innately, or is integrity built over time based off of the expectations that they have within the respective departments? I guess the question is it something that people have as a byproduct of who they are, or is it something that can be built on?
Definitely something that can be built on. And it starts as a child, your exposure. I mean, those parents, grandparents, all of those around you, um, teach you that level of integrity. But it's not too late after the fact. I mean, at any point in time, you can have a change of heart. I mean, we see it often. I've encountered people with criminal records that have served time that have turned their life around and now exhibit all the levels of integrity that you wish to find in the
Yeah,
best people out there.
they just had to learn some difficult lessons before they got there.
Yeah, like they say, it's not where you start, it's where you finish.
Yeah.
But it starts in law enforcement. You really need to begin it before you ever decide to be an officer. It has to be who you are. You can't, you get to drive fast, chase people, shoot guns,
Yeah.
do what many say are
What's
fun
in the
things.
movies, the whole Lone Wolf
Yes,
McQuade, and yeah, I was
yes.
expecting you drive up in an old Dodge, uh,
With a roll bar
Ram
and KC
Charger with the
light.
supercharger in it,
Yes,
and yeah, because you got the mythology in your head, right? But
sure,
it's a different, the reality of it is very different.
sure.
Yeah,
And those are the things that are fun, but
yeah,
it's the smallest part of what we do.
yeah,
Um, I mean, you're comforting and consoling people in their loss sometimes, um, holding back the tears when you're holding a child, telling them their mom just died.
yeah.
Um, so you really have to. There's a lot of emotional strength that has to come with it, and I think exposure and experience, life experiences, play a big role.
Now, Ranger, you talked about integrity, and we've talked about reputation a lot, and this idea that you build this
Mhm.
reputation in all leadership positions, one drop at a time, but you could lose it in bucket loads with the wrong mistake, the wrong decision. You deal with cases of political corruption.
Mhm.
So you've dealt with this a lot. What do you think gets in someone's head when they're at the pinnacle of their career and they've got these positions of responsibility to their community in many instances? They could be an elected official or other form of it, but someone has entrusted them in many instances with a role, and through a lapse in judgment they end up in a situation where you're now dealing with them. What do you think are some of these commonalities that lead to that? And obviously all cases are different, but what are some of the things that you've seen where you're like, you scratch your head and you're like, how did this person get
Mhm.
themselves in this situation?
A lot of times it comes to instant gratification as opposed to long-term results. Um, short-term success they put over
Yeah,
anything else, or popularity amongst family or friends. You know, um, it's always difficult. People donate a lot of money to these campaigns, and it's proven to be beneficial running for office. But when expectations come with that, and you're not prepared as a political official to
right.
deal with those expectations when they present themselves, and that goes back to having integrity and
It
good
does.
morals, right?
That's right. Because if people know where you stand, they won't have those expectations.
That's right.
They know that I'm not going to get anywhere with this individual in terms of trying to change an outcome of something. If that's why I'm a big believer. Look, if you let people know who you are, and you stand firm by your decisions, and people know exactly where you're at, there won't be any possibility. You're going to be beyond reproach, right?
Yes,
Because you can't put because once it happens, Ranger, you're done. They will know
absolutely.
that you are susceptible to, and it is game over at that point. Once you cross that line, you're done.
And how do you get out of it once you make that decision?
Well,
There's no way to
how
get
does
around
some
it.
there is no way to get out of it.
No.
That's what I was gonna ask. There's no way to you've already done it. You've committed this, crime,
Mhm.
and now either somebody's holding it against you or you're having to live with that daily. You know, the pressure of I could get caught at any time or I did the wrong thing. What is my family going to think? There's just nothing good that comes of it. And
No.
you see it all the time where people I'm like, how did they get themselves into that situation?
And usually it's for such a minor gain or benefit.
So what is some I watch 48 hours and sometimes when I'm in the garage doing some work and I guess there's some things that are common elements in some of these bigger crimes. There's like a romantic interest, money. There's like a few kind of commonalities
Mhm.
that go into that. Is that an accurate representation of some of the main things that drive what leads people to, put themselves in a situation where they took someone else's life or got themselves in a really difficult spot?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things we look at in these investigations is motivation.
Yeah.
What motivated or drove them, and quite often it's relationship based or
Yeah.
financial based, or covering for crimes they've already committed.
Yeah.
Um, and it can guide your investigation in the wrong direction sometimes.
Right.
Sometimes there's um, a relationship failure between a husband and wife, which to the point it leads you to believe that's the basis of it, when in reality it could be something completely different. It builds the emotional instability in that person, that when an interaction unrelated to it happens,
It's that pressure cooker effect. Yeah.
they lose their emotional control.
So, Ranger, tomorrow you're talking to our students. How do you tell students that are wanting to become? They're in the process now. I think they're about halfway through. So, good chances are that they're going to get through the entire process in terms of the academy. How do you convey to these candidates or to anybody you're dealing with? How do you keep them from drifting from their core values? How do you get them from never getting, from getting themselves in a situation that's difficult? We all have our core principles and our beliefs that are internal, but you'll see it when people have these lapses in judgment and they strayed from the things that were most essential to doing the right thing. How do you keep people, or what advice are you going to have for the students tomorrow about keeping them focused on what makes them who they are now without getting into those situations, straying from who they
Sure.
believe they are in terms of being a police officer, wanting to be a police officer, doing the right thing.
You know, one thing, that old saying, if you lie with dogs, you get fleas. You know, surround yourself with those people you wish to be one day,
Yeah.
um, and identify those that are trouble and avoid them at all cost. Um, you share morals and the morals you want to have with many in law enforcement. Identify those,
Yeah.
spend time with them, learn from them, um, but interact with them. Have these conversations. How
Yeah.
do you handle this situation? How have you take advantage of those experiences around you? They're going to give you a roadmap to success if you pay attention,
Yeah.
you watch, if you listen.
What's that saying, Ranger, that you often hear? If you let me know who you associate with, I'll tell you exactly who you are,
That's
good or
exact.
bad.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah.
And
That's
it doesn't have to be those with great success. It's those with great morals,
that's right. That's
and
exactly
and
right.
they come in all colors, shapes, sizes, and walks of life.
Yeah. You got to make the investment in having that relationship, in wanting to learn, in listening to life experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what molds us
Yeah.
and good leaders, and find that good leader. Find that, and I firmly believe a great leader is a teacher, is a mentor, is taking that knowledge they have, and they want those beneath them to rise above them.
That's it.
And it starts with like the university, the college, the police academy. The people you have um, can really determine the future of these students and those successes. And in the field, as an officer, you have field training officers. That's from day one. Those are those that give you that roadmap to success,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Yeah, I'm really proud of the work that our officers do, and our program leads for the law enforcement academy. I've watched them for the last 6 years that I've been on campus, and they do a phenomenal
Mhm.
job. We just launched Ranger. I don't know if you're aware of this, but we wanna put really great police officers into the community. But sometimes someone may say, "I wanna be a police officer, but I don't have the funding to go to the Law Enforcement Academy at Brazosport College." We just launched, working with Chris Mazzino, who's our law enforcement, director for the academy. We launched a program called the Blue Line Scholars. So for anybody in the viewing audience that is really interested in becoming a law enforcement officer, we now have scholarships, Ranger, where individuals say, "Hey, you know what? I don't have the resources, but if you're willing to put in the time, we'll pay for the majority of the cost for the academy." Because it's a great investment in our community, and we get to
Mhm.
put good people into the roles that you're talking about.
Sure,
Yeah,
that's an incredible program. We miss, in law enforcement to come to DPS, you have to go to our academy, which is quite lengthy.
yeah,
Stay in Austin. It's a deterrent for a lot of good officers, existing officers that want to. I hear it all the time, and we try to recruit them. Um, and the same with the financial burden. We have to make sure that they're
yeah.
financially stable because it's also a bit of a burden
Sure.
sometimes in that pay. But for y'all to be able to step up and find the money to get these
Yeah.
people in law enforcement, I mean, they all have the
We
potential to grow.
We wanna remove those barriers, Ranger, that's the
Yes.
goal, but we're doing the same with nursing, we're doing the same with several other programs, but for our Blue Line Scholars, for anybody who's interested in becoming a police officer that kinda like you started out in our academy, and
Mhm.
now, you're one of 150 plus Rangers in the state. So, we wanna have those stories replicate themselves over and over and over again, and we think that by providing those resources so that they're not having to worry about, "Well, how am I gonna pay these $4,000?" We've got the now, again, nothing in life is free, right?
Yeah.
So, you have to work hard for those items. This isn't a loan, it's not an entitlement program. It's at the discretion of a committee and the director, and what they do is they'll come in and they'll say, "Okay, this is a good candidate for us to invest in them to get them through the process, and hopefully one day, we might have them, if I'm still here, we'll get them back on the show, and they're going to be telling us that, hey, I'm now doing detective, or
Mhm.
I'm a DPS officer, or I'm hopefully one day producing more rangers." So that's a great part to that program.
Absolutely, and we need the best officers in our communities that we can. Um, and to retire and come back to the communities,
Yeah,
that's another huge benefit. I worked with two investigators in Fort Bend County that came from Houston. They retired with more than 400 homicide investigations under their belt.
400.
You show up to a scene, even as a ranger in those cases, and you ask them, "What do you need?"
Yeah.
Um, and you watch and listen and learn. I mean, those guys have those experiences.
But you also have
Um,
to be humble enough to recognize that, even like in your case, you show up as a ranger, you've got all this training, all this background. But when somebody's done it 400 times, there's always something to learn from somebody who's
yes,
done it that long.
yes.
Yeah.
And to get those retired officers back into your community to bring those expertise as a retirement job. I mean, that is, and what those around them are going to learn from those experiences. It's just invaluable.
Yeah.
How do you put a number on that, you know?
Ranger, let
Uh,
me ask this. We talked a little bit about your journey, right? And you knew where you were headed, you knew what you wanted to do, you set a goal. But the other thing that Rangers are known for is for being extremely persistent, right? We talked a little bit about, once you show up on scene, you're going to stay there while other entities or other agencies and the representatives there are taking shifts and coming and
sure.
going. The Rangers, they're going to stick to it until they're at a place when they can back off a bit. How do you develop that tenacity, that persistence? There's this whole concept that persistent counts.
Yes.
How do you develop that, and how do you convey how important that is to the students that you're going to be talking about tomorrow, or anybody who may be watching the podcast that says, you know what, I'd really enjoy a career in law enforcement,
Mhm.
but there's a lot to be said about sticking to it. You got to
Mhm.
stick through the academy. And then when you're out of the academy, you got to go do field training with the agency
Mhm.
that hired you. And then when you're there, there's this constant learning. And in order for you to be good at what you do, like in your case, you've stuck to it. You've been persistent about it. You've been dogged to the point where you're like, I've set a goal, I'm going to accomplish it. How do you convey that importance of a skill set to the students that you're going to be speaking to, or anybody in the audience? Persistence matters. How do you internalize that?
You said it, set goals, right? Work towards those, and it starts with those small ones. I think they need to start now with what are the short term goals and stick to them. Write them down, read them every day, and find and do everything they can to accomplish each and every one of them as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Set that path. Um, and never lose sight. And when you write them down, when you set it, when you identify those mentors that can get you to each of those goals that have accomplished them, study them, follow them, and find those around you that will encourage you. It's the same as working out, right?
Yeah.
Lord
It's
knows I
funny you
need to
say
do
that. I was
more.
just going to ask you about the discipline
Oh,
part of the job.
sure.
Yeah.
But it's the same way. If you go to the gym with someone else, you may not feel like being there that day or going, but when you know someone else is depending on you to be there, you're
Gotcha.
probably more apt to get there. And it's the same way with the career. Find those that you can partner with that depend on you and you depend on them
Yeah.
with similar goals.
So, Ranger, what about the concept? We talked about persistence and reputation and integrity, character. There's a lot of it that also comes through self-discipline,
Mhm.
right? You have everything from every time that I've met with you, you are creased to the nth degree, right? You've taken time to make sure that your uniform is presented in such a way, from the hat to the shirt to the tie, everything is done a certain way. But then that spills into everything else that you're doing in terms of that self-discipline piece. How important is that as a quality that you need to have to be successful, not just in law enforcement, but if you ever want to reach the pinnacle of a law enforcement agency like the Texas Rangers?
It's that's kind of all the superficial side of it, but those things create an internal code in
Yeah,
you. Um, and with your academy here, the same as our DPS academy, those small little things that you have to do in training, how we march, how we walk, how you present yourself to people. We talked earlier about the 7-step violator. You
yeah,
set those codes and those rules in the recruit school, in the academy, and you have a purpose behind them. It's discipline, it's persistence, it's um, they you have purpose, and just holding true to those consistencies, you'll get out of school, out of recruit school, and you'll find yourself becomes a habit. You're
right.
just doing them over and over. And you may not understand why until one day down the road. I remember our defensive tactics instructor. It was every recruit school at DPS. We say that was the toughest recruit school they ever had.
They only get tougher,
But
right? Yeah,
yeah, there's no tougher one than the one I went through. The reality of it is there's a lot of times you're tested and you're pushed and you don't understand why. They push you to your they try to push you to your limits to show you that your limits are well beyond what you will ever
or
expect them to be.
self-imposed, right? Yeah,
Yes. And so those disciplines, they don't want you to get punched in the nose the first time on the side of the road. They want you to get punched in the nose when the time comes and you say, I've been here before. I'm
yeah,
familiar with this. I
yeah.
can deal with it.
So how do you? Okay, so when you're in those situations, whether it's an altercation, a physical altercation, or something that's, how do you stay cool under pressure?
Again, it all builds up to that moment.
Yeah,
It's being exposed to the little things that test you, that push you, that you grow from. You see it in you have to put yourself out there in tough situations that you're likely to fail or
yeah,
possibly fail. That's how we grow. Um, but when you're exposed to it, when it comes around again, you're going to be experienced, even if it's a more severe situation.
yeah,
It's those little pieces. Investigations, you could have a mass casualty situation that you're investigating. It's high paced, it's fast paced, there's a lot to be done, but it's small pieces of everything you've done in law enforcement already. You're already experienced in doing all of it. It just comes at you all at once.
you're ready for it. Ranger,
Yes.
how much continuing education? You're in a constant mode of learning. How much do you have to do per year to stay not just relevant with what you're doing, but up to date with the latest techniques, strategies, information, everything from AI to new investigating techniques? How do you stay relevant with your craft?
So, TCOL, the governing
Yeah,
licensing body, set standards, but those are the minimum
Right.
standards that have to be met. There are 2-year standards of 40 hours. There's certain classes that have to be taken to meet those standards every 2 years. And then there's the standard of your licensing level, intermediate or basic, intermediate, masters. And there's other classes that have to be taken as you progress through the years of law enforcement to get those certificates. But again, that's the bare minimum. If you want to be great at your job, it takes a lot more training and a lot more effort. And we're blessed at DPS. They provide that to us. A lot of agencies don't have the funding or budgeting
Right.
to give those officers. And I remember when I was there, you pay out of your pocket, you take a day off, whatever it takes to get that training. But you can't have an excuse as to, well, they don't provide for me, so I'm just not going to do it.
You have to be in search of the tools, right?
Yes.
Whether they're going to provide or not, but you have to be in that constant pursuit of excellence, knowledge, information. If you're going to get to the point where you're at, right? You're going to have
Yes.
to make those sacrifices, those
Yes.
investments.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
You're investing in yourself,
that's right.
in your future.
Ranger, you talked a little bit about in previous discussions that we've had about there's specific skill sets that you almost have to work, like critical thinking. We talked a little bit about
Mhm.
that. What are some of those core elements that you have to work on? We talked, I think there were 6 or 7 of them that the Rangers look at. Can you kind of walk us through those pieces?
Sure. Leadership
Yeah,
is, I think,
we're
the
talking
first
here
one.
today. Yeah,
Sure. Critical thinking, flexibility, um, and flexibility not in the physical sense,
right.
but
Yeah, being adaptable.
exactly what I was going to say. You have to be able to adapt and overcome anything that's presented or comes to you. And the only way you can really gain that is scenario based training and putting yourself in those positions, volunteering. When they ask, "Does anyone want to?" You should be the first one with your
Yeah.
hand up.
I had a boss tell me that same thing. He said, never pass up an opportunity to get involved. Never pass up an opportunity to get involved in a committee or an organization and bring value to that. And you watch how your star will rise. And sure enough,
You,
but you have to put in that
you
sacrifice, right?
do.
You have to, instead of, hey, I got this thing to do on the weekend that I want to do for my own personal benefit, I got to spend the weekend doing that. But those types of things have really helped me in my career. I had a boss tell me that exact same thing, Ranger. He said, whenever there's an opportunity for you to step in the fray, even though it comes at a cost of time or involvement or more work, if you want to do this, because I had a conversation with him about setting goals and what I wanted to
Sure.
do. And he said, if you want to get to that level, here are the things that it takes. And it takes involvement. It takes raising you. And what the other thing that he told me, Ranger, I was going to ask you about this because you have to do this as part of your investigation. He would always tell me when you go to one of these committees or one of these sub working groups or a task force, show up uh, kind of with the knowledge and the information to ask really good questions. He said, if you ask really good questions, you can get to good answers. How do you develop the question set that you're going to have when you're dealing with much more, obviously, a lot more on the line than putting together an event versus solving a case that could be very difficult? How do you develop that critical thinking piece?
You know, a great investigator is very inquisitive,
Yeah.
very curious. They always have another question in mind: the who, what, when, why. You joke about with kids, little kids. What do they always say? Why? You
Yeah.
answer it, and then
All
they
the time. Yeah.
why. It's very similar to that. You want to understand the basis of each response and answer. But you listen. You have to be a great listener. One of the big failures or mistakes I see with young rookie investigators is they talk more than they listen. There's a technique and an art. You ask questions, but you have to, you know, somebody told me a long time ago, are you are you listening to me or are you waiting for your turn to talk?
That's a good point.
And you have to you really have to listen to what's being said and what's going on. You have to be very observant, see everything around you, but you have to be thinking 5 steps ahead.
Yeah.
Um,
Rachel, let me ask you this. So you go through this process of learning how to do your job, right? You've gone through all these schools, all this training. The state has invested a lot in your leadership so that you could be really good at what you do. How much does intuition play that gut feeling versus the data, what the information is telling
Mhm.
you. There's some things we deal with investigations too, not on the kind of level that you have. Obviously, you're dealing with much more, a lot more at stake, right? But sometimes somebody will say, "Well, this happened." I'm like, that just doesn't sound right. There's just something off about it.
Mhm.
How much does your intuition play in terms of what you're doing? Obviously, you're using all the science and the math and the metrics and the data, but what does your gut tell you about some of the things that you're dealing with?
You know, the intuition, the gut feeling helps to produce theories in an investigation. Helps you give you possibilities, ideas, but you always have to go back to the evidence, these facts that you can prove, the information. So the gut feeling gives you some direction, some process. But you can't lock in on one
You
theory.
can't.
So that's where you're always looking at the evidence, the strategy of the investigation to support that gut feeling. You don't rule it out, obviously. There's a reason you have that gut feeling because of experiences, things you've seen, your training, what you've done. Even if you don't realize it, it's leading you to believe, hey, there's a good chance this is what happened. The investigative process, you build theories and you just find evidence and stick them where they apply, and whichever one comes up with the most facts to support it typically is the correct theory.
Ranger, let me ask this: as you've navigated this career path that you've been on, and you've reached this pinnacle, do you still have mentors that you contact, stay in connection with, that you turn to? Do you still have individuals that you say, "Hey, I'm dealing with A, B, or C. What are your do you still have that kind of relationship with people that you are fond of and have worked with and have that kind of experience?"
Absolutely.
Yeah,
They're far and few between now at the years of experience I
yeah,
have.
yeah.
They've retired and moved on,
Hmm.
but there's still a few of them that I can call on. But to be honest, those mentors aren't only those with more experience in years. A lot of our younger generation have experiences, and I go to a lot of them often. Um, they're exposed and were raised in a different environment than I, so they have a perception that's different, an angle of view that I don't have. In the Rangers, we're very humble and good about asking opinions of each other. We have text groups, talk groups, email groups, and we're always running things by each other. Hey, am I looking at this right? What do
Right.
you think in this situation? Um, and I would say to young officers, find those around you to look at what you're doing, to read your reports before you submit them on the most simple version, right? Just write a report, write a search warrant. That is what represents you when you submit that to a judge, to a jury, on a case. They may not hear you talk, but they're going to read what you wrote.
Right.
And
Ranger,
so
do you do communications training?
some, it's almost you just get a lot of it. You
Yeah.
get exposed to a lot of it.
Yeah, and the
Um,
cameras, questions, reporters. Yeah.
Yes, and we try to avoid a lot of the media side of it. We have public information officers
Yeah.
that handle most of that.
And there are
Um,
some things, many things you're not gonna be able to share with them. Yeah, so, yeah.
Courtroom testimony is our biggest area. We get a lot of training in courtroom testimony.
Okay. Yeah, I would imagine that's important. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Ranger, let me ask this as we get ready to kinda close out here. What's one last thing about leadership that you'd like to share with the viewing audience? Big part of what you do, right?
It's it's who you are.
Yeah,
It's not a job. It's the person you've become that you want to become. It's who you are in the community, amongst your family. It's what you leave behind. We can't take anything with us when we go. And the only thing that's lasting when we go is your reputation and
that's
the
right.
name you've left. And think about what you're leaving behind when you go.
Yeah. What will people think of you? What will they say about you? What will your legacy be? Because you're
Yes.
right, Range. At the end of the day, we take nothing with us.
Mhm.
But the things that we've done, our deeds, our accomplishments, the things that we've worked all our lives towards do matter to the folks that we've been in service to. So that's an important aspect of it.
Yes.
Yeah. Ranger, I want to thank you not just for taking time with us today, but I want to thank you for coming to speak with our students tomorrow. I know that they're going to have a blast listening to you. They're going to learn a lot. But I also want to thank you for your service. I know that you don't have an easy job. It's a very difficult job. So I want to thank you for what you do. But I also want to thank you, and I'm grateful that you're one of ours. You're a BC graduate, so I'm glad that what you learned here took you so many different places. And I'm also really grateful that you're local and that you're one of ours in our community. So I'm glad that you're back home. And I don't think we could have a better person in the role. So thank you for all that you do. We really appreciate your service and your commitment to making sure that the citizens of Texas are represented in the best possible way by the premier law enforcement agency in the state.
Well, thank you very much. It's an
Thank you,
honor to
Ranger.
be here.
Yeah, thank you, Ranger. Appreciate
Thank
you.
you.
So, for our viewing audience, as we continue down the path of leadership, in one of our next episodes, we are going to talk to members of the clergy, and we're going to find out what it takes to run spiritual organizations and how we deal with the human conditions that help create leaders, and then how we navigate leadership failures when we have to redeem ourselves. So, I want to thank the Ranger for being with us today. I want to thank the viewing audience for being a part of the BC podcast Chomp Talk with Vince Solis, the president of the college. Do us all a favor, hit that like and subscribe button for more BC content. Thank you for being part of the Gator Nation, and we will see you next time.